Hi everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Carrie Jacquet and I'm here today with Joe Gottlieb for another 5 minutes with Joe. We have some incredible CISOs as customers, amazing, and have had the opportunity to watch as they develop strategies around, really amazing innovations. And we thought it would be interesting to talk about some of the commonalities we've seen in these visionary CISOs and what is behind those successful folks. And so let's start with, what's the number one thing you think they all have in common?
Well, there's 5 that we'd like to share. This is fun because we as you were saying,
we know them.
Yeah, they're great people,
think of them.
And they're part of a very dynamic industry. The rubber, hits the road with these folks, guys, gals, whatever you want to call them. The first one I like to think about is vision. To be a successful CISO today, I think you really have to have vision because things are always changing. You've got to be able to anticipate and have a flexible, strategic mind to embrace that level of change and then yet continue to evolve an organization to keep changing. That takes vision because if you can't paint a picture of what the benefits are of change, you can't get people to change. You can't get people to continue staying vigilant as the risks are evolving, which they are constantly doing in security. Now, to be a visionary, to do anything but be interesting, you have to be a change agent. So then you have to think about, okay, how do I harness vision and strategic thinking and have an impact with strategic change? And so being a change agent, more and more in this world, tends to be requiring us to surface data. Now, we talk a lot about data and how effective and useful it is as a compensating control, monitoring the things you don't trust. But this, more in an executive mindset, is all about exerting peer pressure on other groups using data and science rather than fear and craft and politics. All right, so politics are a factor here, but you can neutralize politics in your favor if you can continue to bring data to the fore, so people can say, hey, well, that's undebatable. I see the data that you're representing there that's driving us towards this strategy.
And you're talking about everything from the data of how groups may be managing their security processes. It may be the data around the risk analysis of a BYOD strategy, right? So I think, back to one of the conversations we had where, our CISO at the table was saying, it's for me about saying I can understand the risk involved with a business decision, I can quantify it, and I can take it back to my board, my executives, and I can explain what we're going to deal with. And whether or not we're willing to pay the price for that risk to happen or not, right?
And there are no silver bullets, there are no perfect formulas, but you approximate that understanding with as much data as you can bring to bear on the problem. And just getting into that mindset is really key. That then dovetails into the number 2 characteristic that I see, and that is a metrics-minded character, right? So people thinking about not just data to advance a particular argument, which is really key that we just talked about, but then being willing to measure themselves and to measure others on a repeated basis so you can get this sort of quality-like continuous improvement rhythm going in your organization. Really, really critical. I believe it's the central theme to successful management of any kind. It's certainly becoming more prevalent and particularly useful in the security domain. To be metrics-minded, and I'll repeat, not just to use that on others that you're trying to move and change, also having the intellectual honesty to measure yourself, right? To say, hey, you know what, we're not doing a great job with this. We better make an adjustment ourselves. Earning the credibility with these stakeholders when they see you practicing what you preach with that metrics-mindedness, I think really, really important.
And by the way, there's a whole dialogue happening with securitymetrics.org and others around that, at the highest level. What are we doing to get smarter about, all sorts of data?
If you aren't on securitymetrics.org, you should be on it. It's just a fantastic D-list to be on. Number 3, people management. We know that security carries in a 0% unemployment rate, right? So what does that translate to? That means you better be creating a nice environment to keep people. You better be thinking about how you're holistically leading and managing the organization so that people want to be there. And that translates to everything from being smart about compensation, for sure, but we all know it's not about compensation in the end. It's about environment, it's about challenge, it's about getting recognition for things, for accomplishments that are made by the team and as well as individually. So
and I think on that one, acknowledging what you don't have in your organization and supplementing where you can, so that the folks that are there aren't frustrated and feeling inadequate, or that they have to admit they don't know something, right? I mean, I think
you mean getting help from vendors like us? That was a plug. We did so well to this
Sorry.
point. All right.
Sorry.
Let's keep going on. So people management skills, probably pretty obvious, but given the unemployment rate being 0, really, really critical to keep people and think about retention. Number 4 is business savvy. We've all heard of the IT people, let alone the security person, that is just a gearhead, just a nerd, just a geek, and thinking about their stuff and their technology and not doing an adequate job relating to the business. Well, if you can play both sides, if you can understand the business really, really well, obviously you generate credibility way more effectively than if you're just exercising your functional domain expertise in security. So being able to have that conversation about potential trade-offs in the business model, or, brick and mortar versus online,
Growth
how
markets,
scenarios
yeah,
change,
yeah.
what we're doing about China, whether we're defending our revenue erosion in China or not, all these things,
right.
They are very, very pertinent if you want to be part of that dialogue, and you want to be. You've been asking to be part of that dialogue, so being part of it means demonstrating some real business savvy. And sure, there's a political aspect of that, but the way to sort of, again, neutralize a lot of that is by earning the credibility, earning the trust of those people that you're working with in terms of your own business knowledge.
And I think on the business savvy part, maybe this wasn't something we've talked about necessarily, but also not being tied to the legacy, tied to these vendors have to be the vendors I stick with, and this process, right? I mean, part of it is also being dynamic in sort of recognizing that the world's changed and you got to keep evolving, right?
Well, yeah, if you're not allowing a business change to happen because you're uncomfortable perhaps switching to a new vendor, understanding a new system,
Cloud.
You're going to be slowing down the system, right? So it's your duty really to be a leader in understanding how business is evolving, how business models are changing, how risks and risk profiles are evolving across that landscape, and you can just have so much more impact when you do. The successful CISOs that we work with, you can see this characteristic in spades. Last but not least, I like to end on a fun one, and that is humility. I believe, and I mentioned it in another talk, but humility to me seems to be the emergent property that is so useful in security, because if you have humility, what it means is you're really respecting the threat horizon. You're respecting the adversary enough to be very diligent and vigilant about protecting your organization, protecting your processes. And so we find it as vendors, it's very important to be humble with your own technology. Where is my technology not able to solve a problem? Right. And let's be clear about that. Where is my technology able to solve a problem well? And let's balance those strengths and weaknesses, and let's continue to evolve it in that way. Same thing is true of any process. Same thing is true of any team that you're running and set of policies that you're driving. Having the humility to then be constantly open to where you're failing so that you can make improvements, really, really critical. And that's again an ongoing process that successful CISOs engage in, and it comes from this standpoint of humility. The opposite is hubris, right? If you have hubris, you believe you're untouchable. You believe you have it worked out. You believe you have all the right technologies in all the right places. And clearly we've seen over and over again, the security industry has demonstrated that we don't have it all worked out, and we better exercise a level of humility to stay vigilant and on top of our game. Those are the 5. So vision, metrics-mindedness, oriented people manager, business savvy, and humility.
Yeah, that's a winning.
Good characteristic to live by if you're a CISO, or frankly, in this world, probably applicable to a lot of spaces, but we know the security world best.
And it's also the most dynamically. I mean, it evolves so often that what you invent today, you've got to constantly be rethinking, right? So it's particularly challenging for security folks. So that's it. Thank you so much. That was a really fun one, and we'll be back again soon with another 5 Minutes with Joe.